I wanted to go over the card project for Chapter 6 because it's a little involved and there are several steps to it. So it's helpful to have an overview of how to do it, and then you can write the code on your own. You can use this code. You can also take this code, and if you have a better way of doing part of the game, feel free to improve upon it. You are certainly free to use your own code. This is just a suggestion if you want to follow it. So when we look at the write-up, we basically are only worrying about the dealer's hand, not the player. So the computer is the dealer, and we're not going to worry if we get two of the same card. So say that we draw two cards and the dealer gets two Queen of Hearts. We're not going to worry about that. For those who are experienced programmers, if you wanted to prevent that, you could take and make an array list simulating one deck of cards, and then every time you draw a card, you can remove it from the array list to keep it from being drawn again. But we're not that far. Those of us who are not experienced programmers, that is a Chapter 7 topic. And in fact, if you go to a large casino, they will actually have about 6 decks shuffled together in the shoe that they deal out of, so it is very possible to get two of the same card, and they do that to put the odds in their favor and to prevent people from counting cards. So that is legitimate to have two of the same card, so we're not going to worry about that. So we're going to have a card drawn randomly. We're going to translate the numeric value into the face value and the suit. We're going to print that out nicely, for example, Ace of Diamonds and Two of Hearts, and we're going to keep score. A King, Queen, or Jack is generally worth 10 points. An Ace, if the person already has a total of 10 in their hand, we're going to make an Ace 1 point if they've got 10 or higher. If they have a hand that adds up to less than 10, we're going to make the Ace 10 points. We're not going to worry about that on the first two cards. We'll worry about that for the subsequent cards. I did not make a requirement for you to check that after the first two cards are drawn. So the other rule that we have is that after the first two cards are drawn, if their point value of those cards totals up to 10 or under, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, you're going to draw an additional card, and you're going to keep drawing as long as the cards are adding up to under 17. Once the dealer gets 17 or higher, you're going to stop drawing. So that's kind of a weird rule. I probably should have simplified that. But what we're saying is when the first two cards are drawn, if they total up to more than 10, we're going to stop. But if they total up to anything 10 or under, we're going to draw another card, and we're going to continue to draw until the person gets to 17 or more. So I know that's a little convoluted. We're also going to check when we're done, and if the dealer has 21 exactly, we're going to say he won. If he has over 21, we're going to say he busted, which is basically losing. And if he has under 21, we're going to say he lost. So the first thing I did in my project, which I called Game of 21 Tester, was I took my card class and I modified it a little bit. I made sure to import my random class because I'm going to need a random number. Here's my integer that's going to hold the random number for the card, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'm going to have Jack, King, and Queen. I'm going to have another random number for my suit. Then I'm going to translate the numeric card and suit into a nice string like Two of Hearts. And I'm going to use this face value to do that. I'm also going to keep track of the dealer's running total. And lastly, I'm going to make my random number generator an instance variable. So I set it up like this. I just do the first part of it, private random num is semicolon. Then I come into my constructor and I actually I do the rest of the statement to create the random number generator. So I do the num is equals new random part here. So in the past we've done that as one line of code. Here I'm breaking it into two parts. That's perfectly fine and acceptable. Now I'm also setting up my dealer total and setting it to 0 so that it is ready to go. Now there are at least 10 different ways you could write this program. I've chosen to do it this way. Some people will actually draw the first two cards in the constructor. There are many ways to do it. I'm just showing you one approach. Now that I've set up this random number generator as an instance variable, I can use it over and over in this draw card method. If I set the random number up here, say I were to do something like that, the problem is, notice I cannot reference that random number object anywhere except the constructor, because by declaring it and setting it up within the constructor, I'm making it local to the constructor. If I want to be able to use that in any method, I've got to set it up as an instance variable, which makes it global. So now it's valid for me to do the draw card method and use that random number generator. Notice I've got one random number generator and I'm just manipulating it. Here I'm generating numbers, remember, from 0 to 12, and I add 1 to make sure that I get the numbers 1 to 13. Now I'm going to use that same one for the suit. I'm just going to change it to be the numbers 1 to 4. And remember, 4 here is going to give me back 0, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to plus 1 to it to make sure I get back 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I'm going to have another method where I'm going to translate the card. So if the number that I've thrown for the card face value, which is from 1 to 13, if it's a 1, it's an ace. Here I'm not worrying about the number of points assigned. I'm simply saying 1 means ace, 2 means TWO, and so on. I'm simply translating it for the output. Now in mine, an 11 is a jack, a 12 is a queen, and a 13 is a king. Should I somehow throw a number out of the range, I'm giving back an error message. Then I'm going to translate my suit. If it's a 1, I'm going to say of hearts, 2 of diamonds, 3 is clubs, 4 is spades. To be consistent with what I did above, I'm just going to put a second error here. So if I get that back, I'll know there's something wrong. Notice I put a space here at each one of these so that it doesn't run together with the suit. And now I'm going to send that string back, that nicely formatted string, so that I can print out 8 of hearts, for example. And again, this is simply translating the number to the card. I'm not adding up the score here. I've saved that for this other method. Because I have a few rules, I'm going to need an if statement. If I get an 11 or a 12 or a 13, which are jack, queen, and king, I'm going to add 10 points to the dealer's total for those face cards. If, however, I throw a 1, I need to check, is the total less than or equal to 10 so far? If it is, that ace becomes a 10. Now for any other situation, if I throw a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, I just want to add that numeric value to the total. If I throw a 1, the way this is going to drop through, if I throw a 1, I'm going to add a 1 to the total In this case here, when it drops through to the else, and I know that my total is over 10 because of the way I set this up. When I get a 1 and the total is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, if it's lower than 10, I'm going to make that ace a 10. But in any other case, that ace is a 1, and I drop through in the else, and this also handles the case for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I will get my correct score. Now here I'm keeping this avoid method, and when I actually want to print the score out, I've got an accessor or getter method that's going to return that back. Now I go into my main tester. I'm going to set up a little variable here that's going to help me with my score because I want to keep track of it so I know whether to continue drawing cards. Now there are several ways you could do this main class. You can set up a little extra variable to keep track of the score or not. There's another way to do it for those who are advanced programmers. But I'm going to keep a little variable here in the tester so I can leverage off of it when I need to check my rules for the score to see if I need to keep drawing cards. Here I'm using my constructor, and at this point, if you'll remember, all my constructor does, it sets up that random object and it initializes the total to 0. Now I just print out, hey, here are the first 2 cards. I've got a for loop here. I know I need to draw 2 cards at a minimum. I may or may not draw additional cards. So I'm going to say, in this case, I'm going to start my counter at 1, and I want to loop 2 times. I'm increasing the counter by 1 each time it loops. I start with 1, draw a card, add up my score, and print out the card translation. I loop again for my second loop, draw the second card, bump up the score, print out the translated card, and I only want to loop 2 times, so I'm going to loop starting with 1 and going to 2, and this will give me my 2 cards. Now I did not do the nicely formatted output that I put in the write-up. If you want to do it my way, even if you don't do it my way, I'm not going to get upset if the 2 cards print out on separate lines. That's small stuff. We're not going to worry about that. So now I've got my first 2 cards. Actually, mine do print out on the same line, but I did not put the word "and" between them. Those who are advanced programmers, you could come in here, add a little if statement. If the I variable is a 1, stick the word "and" in there. But for those who are not experienced programmers, I'm not going to fool with that. This is enough just to get the 2 cards printed out. Here I'm just forcing a blank line so my output looks nice. And now I'm sort of using my little local score is variable to get the score to hold it. I'm going to print it out. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. If they already have more than 10 with those first 2 cards, I'm not going to draw anymore. And in fact, I'm just going to skip down here to figure out what their total is and print it out. Win, lose, bust. If the score is less than 10 after the first 2 cards are drawn, as it is in this example where it is a 6, then I'm going to keep drawing as long as the person does not have 17 or higher. So I'm going to use this while loop to do that. Draw, keep score, print it out. Now, in order to keep the loop from being infinite, I have to go ahead and grab that score again. And then that way, when my loop iterates again, it double checks it and I don't get into an infinite loop. If you leave out some type of line like this thing will run forever and will not stop. And then finally, when it's done, it will figure out whether they lost, they won, or they busted. So in this example, I get a 6. That's less than 10. I'm going to draw another card. Now I'm at 13. That's less than 17. I draw another card, 23, and I've busted. Hopefully this will give you sort of an idea of how this thing works. You can run this many times and see that it will give you the correct output